This conference will now be recorded.
All right, welcome everybody. This is Stephen McCord, Northern California Director for CALMS, California Lake Management Society. This is sort of our second webinar. First one was a little different, of the spring season, early spring. So we'll get to that first. Notice you probably got a little message that said this is being recorded, so you can follow up afterwards, but live and in person gives you a chance to ask questions and think in real time with the speaker. So a bunch of people continue to join. Thanks for those who are already on for being on mute and turn off your cameras. You could turn those on and come back off mute if you have a question or something. So the key features on this, you can see some icons are probably up in the upper right on your screen with some people, so you can see who else is logged in. You could message individuals and such that way. And there's another little icon for chat, and you can see a few little messages in there. So you can type in your messages, questions in particular to Anna, the presenter, as she's going along. We'll capture those at the end. So thanks for that. And at the end, we'll have some time for Q&A and that sort of thing. But first, let's give a moment to appreciate our sponsors. And to do that, I'll share my screen. I think this would be easiest this way. Is that working?
Yep.
Okay, great. So Lake Tech is a sponsor for this first webinar, and they produced this brief, it's like a 3-minute video that talks about this. It's sort of a demo of their real-time sensor online tool for tracking these. So let me see if this works. So 3 minutes. Oh, that didn't work. Let me try something else. Hit the play. There.
Signed in, they're going to go ahead and see all their accounts listed right away. If you go into an account, you're going to go ahead and see the project dashboard. Now, this project dashboard is going to be based upon what type of activities are taking place in that account. You can see here we have a couple different widgets. We have a real-time dissolved oxygen gauge here. We have real.
Hey, Steven, it's pretty quiet.
We have an overview site map with some different information on it.
All right.
We also have a graph that's been built by the user here. Now this graph is indicating dissolved oxygen.
Maybe turn it up all the way if you can.
Real time, the air temperature and rain weather data as well. Now different users will have different account tools. You're going to be able to use field logs, photos, and maps.
Just a second. Sorry, it looks like the volume's all the way up. I can't change it.
Now a field log is how a user would
I think if you turn it up on your machine, it might turn up all the way on your machine.
Tried that.
Okay.
Field log can simply be created by hitting the plus icon here, seeing the weather, seeing the general log information here, some account information, and then simply using the services and products that were created by the user to build out the field log and what type of activities took place on site, whether that's a service or a product that was being used on site. You can simply click here, add those items to a field log, and document what was happening on site. You can always come in here, if it's a product, and indicate a zone that the product was used at. Once the zone's been indicated, you can go ahead and click out of the drawer like that. Simply, we are now saving that graphic layer to this log so that can be referenced in the future. So you can always come back, click here, and see where that application took place. You always get information for the latitude, longitude, and area, along with the length or perimeter of where that product was applied. Field logs are a great way to document what happened on site. You can always incorporate some general field notes and also add photos as well. Also under account tools, you're going to be having the ability to save different photo albums, and each album will then be able to store individual photos that can be looked at and referenced by different members that are associated to this account. And also on your account map, you'll be able to indicate different sites, different sample sites, different zones of your lagoon or lake, and then any type of other information that you'd like to put on here to reference with your team. This is a great way to see a simple way of zone 1 could be giving you the area and the perimeter of your lake or water body, and then you can also indicate things like pumps and other items that could be good reference points for you and your team. This is the simple crash course 101 overview. We hope you enjoyed it. We look forward to hearing from you, and if you have any questions, we appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, thanks to Lake Tech for that. Let me unshare that content. And give me a second. Okay, let me go ahead and introduce the speaker then. We have Anna Holder. She's an environmental scientist at the Office of Information Management and Analysis. It's at the State Water Resources Control Board. She's a surface water ambient monitoring program, that's SWAMP, Bioaccumulation Monitoring Program Coordinator, and the Safety Eat Workgroup co-chair. And OEMA's tribal coordinator, so she wears several hats there at the state board, and obtained her master's and bachelor's from CSU Monterey Bay in applied marine and watershed sciences. She was a California Sea Grant Fellow in OEMA in 2019 and began working for the state board in her current role in 2020. And known Anna since she started there, and I always appreciate the work she's doing at the state board. So we're happy to have her presenting today. Let me switch it over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Stephen.
You bet.
All right, thanks, y'all. So welcome, and I'm really excited to be here today speaking with all of you. There should be quite a bit of time at the end for conversation and discussion, so definitely take Stephen up on the offer of adding your questions to the chat as we go through these slides. Before I dive into my presentation today, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge tribal lands in California and express my deep gratitude for the ancestral and native homelands where I am today, a place now known as Sacramento, California. The local tribes who have been and continue to be stewards of these lands and waters include the Nishinan, Maidu, and Miwok peoples, and the Putwin and Wintun nations. And it's important for me personally to take a moment to recognize these peoples and that we are all here because of the sacrifices forced upon them. And in acknowledging and remembering these communities and all of the work that I do, I hope to honor their legacy, their lives, and their descendants. And if you want to learn more about the tribal lands that you may be on, I highly recommend checking out nativeland.ca. It's a great resource, very educational. So today we're going to go on a little journey together. I'm going to provide an overview of the Swamp Bioaccumulation Monitoring Program and Safety Workgroup, and talk about the ways that we're operationalizing equity in our work through something we're calling the program Realignment and tribal engagement that we're doing this year. I'll wrap with how y'all can get involved and have time for Q&A and discussion. So I also have been informed that folks in the comms are generally, technical folks that like to dive deep into the data. That's not what this presentation is about. But my colleague, Dr. Jay Davis, gave a great talk at the comms symposium last year and really explained the history of our monitoring in lakes in California and walked through the results and things like that. So highly recommend checking out that YouTube link, and these slides will be shared with everyone, so you'll get to check that out directly later. So just to kind of back up and talk through all of the agency jargon and acronyms for a moment, the California Surface Water Ambient Monitoring Program, or SWAMP, was established in 2000 and leads and facilitates collaboration between the California Water Board and our numerous partners on a couple of different areas particular to surface water quality in California. The mission is to collect the data and information to help people make informed decisions. And there's 4 statewide monitoring programs and 9 regional monitoring programs, and all of them are designed to tell us how are California waters doing, what are the conditions now, how have they changed over time, where are the problems, and what are the causes, and where do we go from here? How effective are projects and programs at restoring water quality? The Bioaccumulation Monitoring Program is one of the statewide programs in SWAMP, and our purpose is to collect the data and information to help inform folks on which fish and shellfish are safer to eat and which water bodies in California. I'd like to introduce our mascot, Bardo. He's your friendly bioaccumulation buddy, and we're using him to try and get more outreach and attention to folks outside of the swampy world. So there's also the Safety Eat Workgroup, which is a subcommittee of SWAMP and a work group of the California Water Quality Monitoring Council. And the Bioaccumulation Monitoring Program and the Safety Eat Workgroup work very, very closely to make the program happen. A lot of times they're spoken about interchangeably, but they are separate entities, but we work really, really closely together. And the Safety Eat Workgroup is a venue for multi-partner collaboration and discussion, and we meet quarterly. So more on that later. I mentioned a little bit about SWAMP being established in 2000, but I want to also acknowledge that bioaccumulation type monitoring has been happening in California since the mid-1970s and has really been critical in this establishing SWAMP and the Bioaccumulation Monitoring Program and informing, where we are now. Some recent things to keep in mind on this slide is we have rebranded to the Safety Eat Workgroup last year. Some of you might have known the work group as the Bioaccumulation Oversight Group, or the BOG. And I'll talk more about our realignment efforts, which started in 2020, and our tribal engagement is happening this year in 2022. There's a lot on this slide. Again, sharing the slides as a resource later, but the big takeaways here is the majority of our monitoring has been in lakes and reservoirs in California. After that, we've got some coastal monitoring and then river and stream monitoring every 10 years or so. You'll notice since 2015, we've established a long-term Bass Lake and Reservoir Monitoring Program, and that's what Jay spoke about back in October. And this year, our monitoring is focused on river and streams in the Central Valley region and realignment sampling in the San Diego region. So as Stephen mentioned, I started in my current role in 2020, and part of that process was onboarding and learning about the program. And through that, that experience, myself and other SWAMP colleagues started taking a look at the program and figuring out what are the things that we're doing really, really well, and where are the areas that could use a little bit more attention. And 3 pillars or opportunities really stuck out for us. One was building stronger relationships with our tribal partners and communities that are impacted by the consumption of fish and shellfish. Filling in data and information gaps to help inform those consumption decisions, and building stronger connections between the Bioaccumulation Monitoring Program and the water boards at large. If you haven't interacted with the water boards, it's actually 10 agencies and there's a lot going on. So we're trying to do better at partnering with other folks within our organization. And we started a plan on how to do that by initiating something that we're calling a program realignment. And so I have that problem sometimes. And What that means for me is when my back's starting to hurt, I can function and go through the world, but I'm not doing my best. I'm not necessarily thriving, right? So to get back to my best self, I might take some time to do some yoga or go to the chiropractor or get a massage, so that my back is better aligned and I'm ready to, tackle the world as it stands in front of me and do more than just, kind of go through the world with an achy back. We're thinking about this realignment in a similar way. The program has been doing great things for the past 15 years, but those 3 areas of opportunities for improvement are really preventing us from being able to thrive as a program. And so this realignment effort, it's a long-term effort, and it's focused on incorporating community perspectives and needs into our efforts and decision-making, particularly in areas where the public or communities and tribes, California Native American tribes, are dependent on fish and shellfish for subsistence or cultural purposes. You might have guessed there's an undertone of equity in this work. The California Water Board, the State Water Board, adopted a racial equity resolution last year. And in preparation for that resolution and in response to it, we want to do our best to, like I mentioned earlier, operationalize equity into all the work we do. So put those equity principles into practice for everyone at every level of our program. And we're using this realignment process to figure out how we can do that. So the realignment itself will happen in each of the 9 water board regions. Right now we're doing it one region at a time, and each cycle is a 3-year process. So like I mentioned, long-term, right? The first year is focused on gathering the advisory committee, which I'll talk about in a moment, and then working with them to identify data and information gaps that they see in their region for their communities, developing a monitoring plan so that the following year we can start to collect the data to address some of those issues or answer some of those questions, and then continue relationship building and conversations around how communities and tribes want to be communicated with. What does that look like? What are the different modes of communication? And how we can do better partnering outside of the formal realignment cycle in the future. Advisory committees are made up of tribal representatives and community-based organizations, again, all with an interest in bioaccumulation and consumption of fish and shellfish in California. We think it's important that other folks are in attendance to these advisory committee meetings. A lot of different organizations and partners are involved between the process of collecting the data in the field, to analyzing it, to building and developing and posting fish consumption advisories at water bodies in California. And so we want the folks that are involved in that process to participate in the advisory committee process in the region, so we can all hear what the concerns are and work together to find solutions. So we invite agency representatives from places like Fish and Wildlife and OEHA. It is part of the California Water Quality Monitoring Council, so there's a representative of the council as well. I mentioned my colleague Jay Davis. He's critical to be part of these conversations. And then this process is in-depth partnership with our regional board partners. So coordinators from the regional boards are invited to join the process, and then statewide swamp staff to help facilitate and keep things going from the logistical side of things. A key part of this is putting our money where our mouth is when it comes to equity work. So we have carved out funds to support honorariums for the tribes and community representatives that participate and engage in this process. It's a long-term commitment. 3 years is a big deal. So we want to acknowledge that expertise that they're bringing to these conversations. the largest part of the funding goes towards the monitoring for different locations, species, and pollutants that the advisory committee deems important to learn more about. We started this process in 2020, as I mentioned, and very early on, it was clear that we needed to dedicate more time to tribal engagement and partnering with regional board partners. So we have dedicated this year to statewide tribal engagement in California, not necessarily to get to an outcome of getting tribes to commit to this process in the future, but more to start to build and foster relationships and find opportunities for collaboration and connection, and to gain interest to see if this is something they might be interested in participating in the future. And really to dedicate time to answering questions and exploring curiosities that we might come up with together during our conversations. Lots of timelines here. We're in the early stages of this tribal engagement process. It was officially launched on the 15th of March. Mailers went out to 164 tribes in California on the 22nd. And so now we're trying to find folks and welcoming tribes to meet with us to begin this relationship building process. And those conversations will inform which region will come next for the next realignment cycle. I mentioned that we started the realignment process in 2020. We started the realignment cycle in San Diego in 2021. And even with just 3 meetings, the advisory committee and regional board partners, we've achieved a lot in that short time. So we've met 3 times, really dove into data and information needs to develop a pretty comprehensive monitoring and analysis work plan. We've also developed a summary of longer-term recommendations, the things that maybe aren't specific to monitoring for the next year, and maybe won't even be able to be fully solved in the 3-year process, but things that we want to elevate and highlight for longer-term partnership and planning going forward. And all of these products are available at that bit.ly link. The Realignment Committee has had opportunity to review and provide feedback on all of these documents and approve their publication. So I mentioned the tribal engagement in 2022. We're also going to continue conversations with the San Diego Realignment Committee and conduct that sampling according to the realignment monitoring and analysis work plan we built together last year. And as I mentioned, the statewide tribal engagement will occur this year from March to November. We'll continue conversation and relationship building long after that, hopefully, but March to November will help inform the long-term realignment plan, which will be published in December of this year. So we're wrapping up here, and I'm really excited to hear conversation and questions from you all. If you are a representative of a tribal government in California and want to participate in this engagement process, have a chance to chat and get to know each other a little bit, there's a link to a tribal engagement interest form, and that basically just tells me who you are and what your interests are and when you're available to meet and who else should be part of that conversation so that we can get something scheduled in on our calendars. It's important to note that this tribal engagement and participation in the realignment process is not limited to federally recognized tribes. All tribes in California are welcome and encouraged to participate, and there's no deadline to complete the form. So like I said, we're doing focused engagement from March to November, but we want to continue this relationship building and partnership long after this year. If you're not part of a tribe but are interested in the program and this work and it aligns with some of the things that you do, I highly recommend that you participate in the Safety Eat Workgroup. Membership is open to anyone with interest in bioaccumulation research, monitoring, or fish consumption advisory development. And it really gives everyone a chance to connect with other potential collaborators and inform and potentially guide the future monitoring efforts of the statewide program, and be a part of a really large and wonderful community in California. And that's all I have for my slides. So I'm happy to take questions and circle back to anything.
Well, great. Thanks, Anna. We'd give a round of applause. We're all in the same. It's a statewide round. How's that? So any questions? I didn't see anything in the chat. The main one I had, I guess, was maybe just go back one slide. How you can participate, get involved in the stew. It's the sense from the current members here is that this is agencies at the broad sort of coordination level. What about involvement or supporting these efforts or whatever at the lake management level, like a lake owner or manager or somebody that runs a marina or something like that, where people are interested in this sort of thing?
Yeah, so great question. We're always looking for new partners. This work takes a lot of time and resources from a lot of different folks, and figuring out ways that we can work together to use those resources more efficiently and effectively to get to the answers that we're looking for when it comes to the consumption of fish and shellfish in California is always a great thing. So the current members and the logos that you see on the screen are the folks that have been participating historically, but there are many more logos that should be on this page in terms of the people that attend and contribute to stew meetings on our quarterly basis, including tribal advocacy groups and local and regional lake management agencies and things like that. All are welcome.
All right. What about the access to sites, or even the selecting of sites that are monitored for bioaccumulation, or interpreting the results if there's some anomaly someone local might know why it would be wildly different or something like that?
Yeah, in terms of site selection, those conversations happen openly during the Safety at Work group meetings, and there's usually a call from regional coordinators, and particularly the OEHA, the Office of Environmental Health Hazards Assessment, in terms of what's needed to develop fish consumption advisories. But part of this realignment process is really hearing from folks that are outside of our historical norm. And so if someone is on a call and think, yeah, those sites are great, but what about this one? This is important to me because we would love to hear about that and look into that.
Got it. All right. I see another question in the chat from Mark Silos. Should I say President Mark? Why are there different benefits? Can you see it?
Yes.
Okay,
yes, I can.
Take it from there.
Yeah, so the question is, not sure if you're the right person to ask, but why are there different beneficial uses and fish tissue guidelines for subsistence and tribal subsistence? Also, how does the water board determine whether water bodies host these issues? Okay, two separate questions. So there are different beneficial use definitions for subsistence and tribal subsistence, because the impact and exposure that tribes might experience through their subsistence is different from recreational use and subsistence in general. And I am not the expert on the history behind those decisions. I would point you to our Tribal Affairs website, who kind of talks through the tribal beneficial uses and how they were developed and what the more detail on those differences. But my understanding from the the learnings that I have been gaining over the past couple of years, that really has to go through exposure and impact of consumption by the different communities. How does the water board determine whether water bodies host these uses? So there's something called a basin plan that each regional board has for their region, and those kind of talk about the beneficial uses in that region. And there's a process called a designation process where the regional boards who have the authority to manage the basin plan and make these decisions, right? I'm at the state board, I don't have that authority. They basically designate water bodies with certain beneficial uses based on data and evidence that they have to support that designation. And that is a long-term, complicated process. And it looks a little bit different in each regional board, which makes sense. Each region's a little bit different, but that's how I would answer that question. But I have links to references and resources behind the main slide deck, and the Tribal Affairs website, the Water Board's Tribal Affairs website is great for explaining that in more detail.
Yeah, I recall too. Go ahead.
I guess, yeah, you might not be able to answer this, but are the water bodies that are or will be designated with the tribal subsistence beneficial use all on tribal lands, or do they not necessarily have to be on tribal lands?
No, they don't have to be on tribal lands. And most of them probably aren't, just because of the history of tribes and tribal lands in California. So they don't have to be on tribal lands, but tribes are critical. You know, we have a government to government partnership with tribal governments in California. So incorporating the tribal subsistence into all water body, the designation process is helpful.
Awesome, thank you.
I can, recalling too, when the new beneficial uses were defined, they didn't come along with actual water bodies being designated as such. It was just the definitions first and then go find the places.
Right, and all of the regional boards are in slightly different phases of the process to adopt the definitions to their basin plans and then designate specific water bodies with tribal beneficial uses and anything else in that region.
All right. Hey, Scott McReynolds, I see you're not on mute. Did you have a question? Maybe the background noise we hear is from you too.
Sorry.
Okay. I take that as sorry for the background noise. No, I don't have a question. No problem.
Yeah, somehow it got unmuted and.
All right. Let's see. Any others? I think when's the next meeting?
Yeah, like you're a plant, Stephen, and we asked you to talk about that. So I'll just go through some of the backup slides. So here are some links to additional resources, including a fact sheet that talks about what the heck bioaccumulation is and what's the program and what's the Safe to Eat work group, and links to our Safe to Eat work group quarterly meetings. The next one is April 27th. They're generally 9:30 to 12:30, but we try and only meet when we need to, meaning if we don't need to meet for that full time, it'll be a shorter meeting. And to stay informed on what's coming up, what's on the agenda, I highly recommend you join the email list. And let me see. Oh yeah, there's links also to the other swamp monitoring programs, and just kind of a big picture view of the different monitoring that has occurred with the bioaccumulation monitoring program. So lakes and reservoirs, coastal surveys, and river and stream surveys. So all of that will be shared whenever the recording is available and they get that stuff out.
Great.
So I see Mark has another question about will the program be monitoring PFAS in the future? That's a great question. So my most authentic answer is I don't know yet. And we're using the realignment process to really gauge what's important to tribes and communities in addition to our regional board partners. PFAS is an emerging concern in terms of like where it is in the regulatory process. It's been around for a while. It's been a concern for a long time outside of that. I would also note that we're looking more closely at the interaction of harmful algal blooms and cyanotoxins in fish and shellfish in California and how that impacts the safety of consumption. Same goes for microplastics, Chung, thanks for that question. And this is another great reason why we're going through this realignment process, right? We've spent 15 years looking at mercury and PCBs and selenium and all these other pollutants and analytes, and have filled in a lot of data and information gaps. But as we're learning more, we're finding other opportunities, like with PFAS, microplastics, and cyanotoxins. So we're, I think in one of the timelines, there's a note about 2024, we're going to be kind of looking at the program for big picture, long-term monitoring priorities, and those three things will be at the top of the agenda in terms of how we might modify our program to better incorporate that type of monitoring in the future. But I don't know what that looks like yet. We'll see.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great. I'm not sure what TQ means. Okay, well, if there's no more questions, we can close this part of it out. Thanks everyone for attending. I should mention that this is being recorded, and we'll provide a link to the recording pretty soon, as well as a PDF of these slides, so you can find these links and all that. And Anna's available for questions by email and phone and stuff as well, I'm sure. We'll have, we have 3 more webinars scheduled. Well, 2 more scheduled and 1 more possibly in June. So there'll be one in April and May. One in April is on, I think it's high elevation lakes and harmful algal blooms. And then in May, it'll be on a demonstration and discussion about a modeling tool. It's a water management model that incorporates reservoirs. So kind of a nice management tool at the water district sort of scale. And I can't remember what the one in December is, or June, but that'll be scheduled soon. So look forward to seeing some emails with a link to the recording for this one and announcements for the upcoming ones. So, okay, so if there's, oh yeah, and Mark just put a link in the chat to the Calms YouTube channel. So that's where you'll see the recordings and whatnot. So, so thanks again, Anna, for taking the time to present this and all the good work you're doing with this group and the realignment and all those extra efforts that just make California a better place for all of us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Hope to see you all at a stew meeting.
Yeah, in person someday with chocolates.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Take care.